How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Listen, we don't know each other. We're seeing each other for the first time on the Zoom, but we have had, I feel like some of the coolest voice note exchanges of anyone I've talked to. Like you're a very interesting person and you're very insightful. I think it was when I had conjunctivitis and you said something like that's liver, or is that what you said?
Yeah, we were talking about the eyes and
Yeah.
how it's connected to other parts of the body. And because with every organ, right, there's an energy. I mean, if
Mhm.
I've studied and completely fascinated by, Asian philosophy, Asian means of healing, the Eastern, and all things beautiful and thousands of years old. So, in the way that I work, I truly do take the whole body into account. And so, we in the West get stuck with, oh, this, because the problem is here, then that's what the problem is, when it almost never actually is where the problem is. It's just where it manifested.
Oh, I love it. I'm not even going to get into the whole strange conversation that's online about the fact that your emotions can create physical problems, because I didn't know that this is very controversial, this concept. So I'm not even going to get into that. I'm going to acknowledge that it's controversial to say that the thoughts and emotions and feelings we have can lead to physical problems. It doesn't mean that your physical problems are your fault. Doesn't mean that, you can't get physical problems, just because you had bad luck. It doesn't mean that. It's just, I don't even know why I'm getting into this. I'm going to cut it out. It's like, do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I'm probably not part of your, I have a foot in your world of HRT. I mean, I'm a woman,
Yeah.
I'm going to be 51 years old. Like, of course,
Yeah.
I have my finger on the pulse, but do I pitch camp in that world? No, because I have found, not only with my own 10-year journey, right? Because our 40s are an absolutely incredible time in life. The person I began at 40 and the
Mm.
person who I discovered and really evolved into by 50, miles apart, miles apart. And it's been the
Yeah.
most incredible journey of my life. Has it been easy? No. Am I a victim of it? Fuck no. I refuse.
Right.
I refuse to be a victim of it. And what I'll say to this is, if we just kind of let everything be controversial, then actually nothing is controversial. So I work in the energy
Mm.
world, and in my world, none of it's controversial, because it is what it is, because that's who we are. And I
Mhm.
refuse to play that victim mentality in any aspect of my life, or in anyone else's life for that matter. I think we're creating a victim mentality with a lot of things going on, but that's like a whole other podcast in and of itself.
No, I agree with you. I think I mentioned it because someone just called me out on something on that. And I was like, oh God, like, do I have to worry about this? Because to me, it's a no-brainer that if your thoughts and your feelings, and that illness comes from a variety of factors, including, inside us, that just seems standard to me. I'm very interested in the mind-body connection, but
It's everything. It's
it's
everything.
everything. And when you describe the 10 years, I mean, I compare the menopause, perimenopause journey to a hero's journey, which is like at the core. I took a screenwriting course a couple of years ago, and I was like, this is, first of all, I apply it to way too much stuff, but yeah, I think it's this, because you have to change. You absolutely have to change in a lot of different ways, but it's so enriching. And part of the conversation that bothers me, that's all HRT all the time, is it's denying the spiritual part of the journey. And I think if you deny yourself that, you're denying yourself. First of all, don't you think you're setting yourself up for the rest of your life very well, right? If you're just sort of clinging to your old ways of doing things. But you're focusing on the physical, and that's gonna get you only so far. So that's why, Body Whisperer, tell me what you do.
If I could do that, it's like Richard Feynman. If I could tell you
Right.
how I won the Nobel Peace Prize, then I wouldn't have won it. Like, that's
Right.
kind of the way I feel. I mean, I don't, by no means do I compare myself to Richard Feynman, but I'm just, that quote I've always loved. And I work with the physical aspects of a woman's body and women's health, especially over 40. It fascinates me, the change in which the actual biological and physiological changes we go through as a woman, beginning for some women at 36, 37, 38, although I think that's more lifestyle, unless you have a generational history of going through menopause or perimenopause early. I truly think that 42 is like the magical age. It's like when everything really shifts and changes. And if I had $1 for every 42-year-old woman who came to me or said at 42, or 3 years ago when they're 45, like I literally, it's, and there's something to be said about every 7 years, right? So I want to go back to something you said earlier, and it speaks to my work. So I work a lot in the energy centers of the body, and there's a lot of healing that can be done when you combine both what the body is saying to you, because our body is a constant dialogue with us, right? So in our body is housed our soul, our higher self is above us, or not necessarily above us, but it's not inside of us, right? And we have our auric body, our etheric body, we have our organs, we have our nervous system, we have the whole intercommunication loop of the endocrine system. I mean, I could do a whole podcast on that alone, like how in every energy center, there's an endocrine organ or I mean, technically, I don't know if it's a gland or an organ, whatever, but there's a communication loop. And that's really how, on a physiological level, the body talks, but then on an energetic level, those energy centers talk to each other. And then, of course, we have the nervous system, which is how, it begins in the head, in the brain, and then moves down the spine and comes around and attaches itself in some energetic and non-energetic capacity to facilitate this whole, cacophony of what we consider health or dis-ease, right? And so that's what I do. I work with all of those things together. So sometimes a woman will come to me and it's very clear from a very scientific perspective, you need to be combining your food this way. You need to be changing some of those stories you're telling me, because you're literally living in a victim's home, right? And when you live from that place, everything you see and everything you touch and the lens by which you live your life is from a victim's mentality, which means there always has to be a victimizer, right? It's never your responsibility, and yet you're the center of all those stories, right? So I don't see our 40s as a time to change. I actually see it as an evolutionary process, because our energy centers, our 7 major chakras, they evolve as we grow and gather time. So I use the word gathering time as aging. So like the third eye in the crown chakra actually develop from 35 to 50, 37 to 50. So it's no wonder we have a little anxiety, or we think we're going a little crazy, or we all of a sudden start talking spiritual woo-woo talk, is because we're actually connecting and developing and really creating and finishing, not even finishing, but like, it's like development, right? It's like a baby has to do some sort of roll over, sit up, crawl, pull up, some version of that before they can walk. You have to physically develop those muscles. Well, I think it's the same thing. I've noticed it in my life. Like I had intuitive abilities in my late 30s, but boy, you weren't catching me using those on anybody but myself and my two boys. At that point, they weren't teenage, but that's who I was using it on. And then I tried to use it on an extended family member, and boy, that didn't work. That was like, who do you think you are? What are you doing? And then I started using it with my clients and not calling it what it was. And then it evolved into coming out of the spiritual closet about a year ago and saying, this is who I am and this is what I do. And, basically, if you don't like it, I don't let the door hit you on the way out kind of feeling. Cause like, I'm not going to not be this anymore.
Right. You just couldn't not.
No.
And that's part of this age too, I find. It's like you just can't not be going in the direction where you're going.
It hurts. It hurts physically to not speak about it.
Right.
It felt like I itched.
You.
It was like an itch. It was like an itch that I refused to scratch. And then it got so bad that I felt like I couldn't be in my body. And I had a real somatic experience of the awakening. It wasn't an awakening. I knew I had it. So I almost died in childbirth. The first time I had a really traumatic first birth where I literally like had the feeling of like, I'm leaving. And I felt all of probably what they were my guides at the time, but it felt as though it was like my entire maternal ancestors who had all left this realm, and they were holding me in. And it was,
Wow.
I've since worked with psychic teachers and had people work with me in terms of like truly understanding and developing, because you can have urges and sensations and literally not know what to do with them and not know what they are. In the same way that you can have physical symptoms and think you're dying, but in actuality, you just need a supplement and you'll be fine. Like if I had $1 for every woman who just needed to take B vitamins to actually feel better, it's exactly the same thing. You think you're going crazy, but actually you just need to express yourself, or you just need to take a B vitamin, right? So that's kind of, that's sort of the evolution. And then the past year, my business exploded. I worked with women. We've had, the interesting thing about science is science takes time, and energy work happens over time, but it doesn't take time. And in fact, time is completely irrelevant. A woman can have we can do a body whisper session, which is where I take women on a voyage. It's like a guided meditation in their body. We can do one session. And I'm not saying this happens all the time, but we can do one session and a woman can literally have a realization where she is out of victim mode and understands the progression of what happened in her life. And she hasn't been in therapy for 5 years. Like, and I'm not dissing therapy. Therapy is incredibly helpful to a lot of people, and it's what has gotten them from like a fetal position in bed to now fully functioning human. But there is an element of healing, of therapy and coaching, where it's a little kind of like, well, I need this to up level, and I need this to feel better, and I need this to function. And it's kind of like, in my work, you actually don't need me. You need me for a second until you like get it, till things start to click, until you start to really connect with yourself, which is what this journey is about. It's a fully formed and connected version of yourself.
Well, it almost I've had those experiences lately, and you only need to experience it once to believe it, right? Like you only need, like when you start to tune into that energy for what it is, then that transforms you. And then, I think I've had traditional therapy for 4 years, and I realized that I was, I solved some things. I worked on some things, but I realized I was outsourcing. Like when you start thinking, oh, I'll just talk to my therapist and then I'll feel better, that's a really bad sign to me. And, that's not that's not really how it should be, that you need to talk to someone else to figure out how to tune into yourself. And okay, so women come to you. Do they come to you and say, whisper to my body and make me better? Or do they come to you and they,
no, a lot of them
I'm just
are
picturing you like, no,
yeah.
do they come to you and do they know what's going to happen? Do they come to you saying, I feel like you said 42 is a magic number. And I think that's really interesting. And is it like the point at which we sort of, in the context of perimenopause, but is it the moment at which we can't handle anymore, like a disconnect? It just sort of breaks open? Or what is 42? What about 42?
So this is something I've never actually really articulated, because sometimes you don't know how out there your ideas are that you've been, or, again, I just, by no means am I the epitome of like forward thinking and knowing. I'm sure there's people out there doing what I do and thinking similar thoughts. I just haven't found them yet. But I sort of, part of what I think it is, and this is channeled information. This doesn't exist that I know of somewhere, other than I do know a couple of doctors. And in fact, I'm going on a retreat in June. And when I saw this written down, I was like, oh my God, this is what I've channeled. We are cosmically connected, and I had to do it. Right. So she is the only other person who I have seen actually write this down about the chakras being sort of coming fully into the energy centers, coming fully into completion or development or enriched, or however you want to say it, in stages of 7. And I truly believe now there is an absolute physiological experience of the ovaries that are happening at 42. Like, I'm not going to say that none of that matters. I mean, 100%, that's scientifically proven. I'm not going to fight that. But what I think is actually part of the tricky thing is I think we're moving. So I think part of it is developing the third eye and then our connection to the crown. And I think it's going from one chakra to the next. That is such a profound shift. And it's because that is in our those energy centers exist in our mind and in our brain, in our head, around our heads, and our physical head. And that's where our nervous system is. And that's where our hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal, all of that's where all of those, the amygdala, all those parts are, right? So you start messing around with energy in there. And of course we're going to feel that. Of course, that's going to jolt something into place, rattle something that's been dark and dormant for a long time. Of course that's going to happen. So to me, it's just a natural progression of this whole 3D, very human experience that is very different from our soul's experience. Our soul is like signed up for this, like this ride. Our soul is like, give me the goods. I want to feel it all, because that's what it's, right? That's how I understand the soul to be, is like souls line up at the door for this kind of experience of a human body, right? And so of course we're gonna feel things, we're gonna experience things. And it's number one, we have the experience. Number two, it's our perception of this experience. And then number three, it's the stories we create based on that perception. So if you work with that model, and that's kind of like a very simplified model, something I help people understand when we get into victim mode, right? Like, I'm not a victim because I'm a woman. I'm not a victim because I'm aging. I'm only a victim if I allow that to be something that really penetrates, right? I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to shoot this is no judgment to any woman out there doing it. I refuse to put fillers in my face in order to look a certain way, feel a certain way about myself. I can't even imagine that. Same as coloring my hair. And again, there's absolutely no judgment here, but first of all, I can't even imagine time-wise, like every couple of weeks, like it's a time commitment that I can't even imagine. I can barely shave my legs, for Christ's sake. And, that's like easy. That's like 1, 2, 3, wham, bam. But there's things that I can't imagine doing as a woman, because there's no part of me that feels like I need that, or like that's going to make anything better, or like having that particular hard-boiled egg look is, I don't know, this doesn't entertain me at all in my life at this moment.
Well, you understand energy, and you understand devoting energy to fighting time is futile. But what I heard you say, which seems to be missing from a lot of the world, is that we're human, spiritual beings having a human experience. We are here, and a lot of people don't understand this. They've never heard it, and they think it's wacky that we're a soul. And if you don't think about this, this is nuts. But, I've known this on a level, you have to get it somehow. I watched my uncle die, and I thought, there's no way that energy didn't go somewhere. And there's no way that the energy that, I haven't seen a baby being born. I really would like to, because I feel like it would be like interesting to see the whole thing, but I'm 100% certain. And, I couldn't be more certain that we're somewhere before we come here, and we're somewhere after. And that energy that animates us is that's what it is. But the entire world is geared to sort of helping you forget that, or encouraging you to forget that.
I mean, perfectly, so perfectly encouraged. Yeah.
Yeah. So this conversation is devoid almost of this kind of thing, because it's not, it doesn't sell anything. It doesn't, like you said, you're not a victim. And, it's kind of abhorrent, this discussion, because this is a problem. It's been foisted upon us, and we have to fix it. And all the fixes are external. So, what you're saying, I guess, is controversial, because someone who's listening, who's like, no, but I really need it. It can all exist at once too, right? By the way, we are human bodies that have, yes, I don't believe it's a hormone deficiency, but there is a transition happening that involves a, reorganization of hormones in the way that I think they were supposed to be reorganized. Bit of or a lot of an evolutionary mismatch in the toxins and things that are coming our way that may be making this worse. But these can all exist at once, right? Like, this is what you're saying.
They have to. And going back to something else you said, like, I had to have, so I'm on testosterone. We've talked about this. I'm on testosterone. I had huge amounts of pain. And as soon as I went on testosterone, a very low dose of, bioidentical testosterone or whatever, like the pain really went away. And I worked on that pain in every possible way, energetically, physically, spiritually, mentally, every way I possibly could. And as soon as I went on that, I could feel, I'm not pain-free, but my pain threshold went from like low 90s to now it's like in the 20s or high teens on a good day. I'm a different human being. So do I partake of the smorgasbord of the Western paradigm? Of course I do. Like, I'd be stupid not to. And by no means am I saying that energy solves everything. There are people out there that would say that. I don't happen to be one of them. I happen to believe that we're living in an incredible time where we have access to this and we have access to this, the science and the spirit. And I think the more that we intertwine and weave a new way of existence, which, by the way, happens to coexist and coincide with what's happening in politics, in the earth, in the environment. Like, I work with environmental energy all the time. I work with all sorts of botanicals, all the things, right? We have all these things at our disposal, and to not use all the things, including energy and including bioidenticals, you'd be asinine. In my opinion, that's obtuse, right? And so I want to go back to something you said, though. You said something like, I don't believe that you said something to the effect of like, we don't need to feel bad that we caused something. I want to say something, and I want this, God, if I could have this on the megaphone for every woman out there,
Okay.
this is what it would be, right? It would be, if it's in you, you have had a part in creating it. It doesn't mean that you should punish yourself, but it means that for every energy source, negative or positive, there is the exact opposite of that. So, for example, I had to go get a mammogram to have this. I haven't had one. Again, another controversial, you may pull this one out, but I don't feel like I needed them. I do lots of testing. I metabolize estrogen, my metabolites all going down the right pathway. I just don't, that's not going to be what gets me. I just know it, right?
There's a lot of people who don't, like, it's very controversial to say in our client, but there's a lot of people who have other ways of monitoring their risks. Yeah,
exactly.
That's just the truth. That's just the truth.
It is the truth. So I've had 2 mammograms in my life. I had one at 40, and as soon as I had it, because I wanted to experience it, it's actually not that bad in my opinion, but my breasts are not very big. And I did nurse 2 boys for a very long, for like nearly 5 years. So I just feel like there's not much to them. So squeezing them, like, not a problem. It's not a cakewalk, but it's like not as horrible as everyone makes it out to be. And I just want to say that for all the women out there who are dreading it, right? Like, it's not actually that bad. If you let it not be bad, it won't be bad. But anyway, I just had a second mammogram a couple months ago, and I was having this conversation with the woman. She was like trying to make me feel better. I'm like, dude, I don't feel bad about, like, you can turn that tape recorder off. Like, I don't need this. We can just chit chat and make jokes or whatever. And she said, I don't want you to worry about cancer. And I looked her straight in the eye. I said, I'm not worried about breast cancer. Like, I believe that if I got breast cancer, that energy is meant for me to experience. And the flip side of that is if I get it, I can also heal it. But again, that is a belief that I hold very dear and true. In fact, I get full body chills every time I say it. That is a belief that I believe so deeply in every fiber of my being. So I believe that if it comes to me, I will have the resources. I will know what to do. I am already doing what I know to do in order to minimize my chances of it. And by the way, I'm adopted, so I have no idea what my family history is. So I don't even have that. Which I'm actually kind of grateful for, because it means that there's no mind play going on up there. There's no chatter going on. And in fact, the great big unknown means I just get to experience whatever comes at me, and I'll figure it out as I go. So I wanted to say that
beautiful.
For anybody out there, like, if it's in you, you have caused it. To some extent, you have been a part of the experience, but you also have the power to change it.
I said that, and even as I was saying it, I'm like, I'm doing this thing because I believe that too. It's just that I got called out on something, but it's in a way that I don't believe, because I do believe that you play a role in almost anything. And I'm the same. Every single challenge I had in my 40s, I believe I didn't know that I had perimenopause. I didn't know about it. And I'm glad I worked through everything. I worked through all stuff that needed to be worked through. And I think everything that came my way is what I needed to, every challenge I needed, even the health challenges I'm having right now. I know what it's from charging through life and not feeling emotions. And, like there's many, many things, but this has become controversial. So sometimes that is so loud. Those people that want the ability to victimize. It's absolutely deafening in menopause and perimenopause. Like, it's literally like, this should not be happening to us. It shouldn't be happening to you. There's a way to fix it. Don't try to say this. It's medical gaslighting is like the craziest term used to shut down debate or discussion. It's really bothers me.
It bothers me too. And can we just talk about for a minute, like, what this is doing to men? Because if a man had this, we'd have every this and that and the other. And I don't believe that at all, number one. And I also truly believe in the divine feminine and the divine masculine energies. I believe that they both need to exist in order to have harmony. And I believe that this victim mentality, this victimized women's movement of I call it big meno. So whenever I find like 20-year-old models modeling bottles of pills that are going to solve every weight loss or thyroid or inflammation issue in me, I mean, my eyes could not roll farther back in my head. And then I put it up in my stories and I label it, hashtag big meno, because that's what we're moving into. You mark my words, it's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, because there's something like 1 billion of us on the planet in the next 5 years or something. I mean, it's like, of course there are women aging. Hello, we're here.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, if I could the flip side that's not being experienced, because if it's all going to be focused on the physical, this is not going to be great. But I really like Zach Bush, and he talks about how we're changing and our whole world is changing, and the broken wing that we've been flying on, and we're now going to have 2 wings, and the divine masculine and the divine feminine, the feminine is rising. And I get concerned because I feel like this mass, more women are going through menopause, but it's essential to me that we assume responsibility for this. This whole journey is about me, my own accepting personal responsibility for every aspect of my life.
It's sovereignty. It's literal sovereignty. It's not, responsibility is like a weight, but then if you think of it as a sovereign journey of truly becoming whole. And I know there's women out there like rolling their eyes, like in so much pain and agony and really cursing what we're talking about right now. But I love that Zach Bush is actually, I haven't heard that side of him. I love Zach Bush, like love him, would love to meet him one day. But going back to divine feminine, divine masculine, if we keep talking about menopause in this sort of, wounded feminine way, it will not get better. And we will have even more women who are not sovereign, who don't understand the journey, and who don't take radical responsibility. Radical meaning of the root, like the root of the root of the word radical, the root, not radical as in some kind of, voodoo magic, something out there. So I think that conversation is really important. And I just need to speak more about it, because I don't talk enough about this, because I don't see other people talking about it. And I think, oh God, the haters, I already have people who send me like ridiculous things. And most of the time I just block it. But every once in a while, there'll be 1 or 2 that kind of get me and like help me crawl back into my little,
well, you pay attention.
voice.
I mean, this happens to me too, because I'm a strange person because I'm moderate, but I really do believe, like, I was like, I need to bridge this gap between the mainstream and the spiritual, because there is mainstream and holistic. There is like, it's all necessary. It's all necessary. You can't have one without the other. And there's so many people on the far side, and it's just reflective, I think, of the world the way it is now, right? The loudest people on the far ends of the spectrum of everything are creating the conversation. I don't know that it's reality. I don't know. I think a lot of women are really thoughtful about this. And sometimes I think when you look at social media, it seems like that's what's going on. I'm not sure, but if someone is very angrily defending their position as the only position, then to me, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
I
you need
agree.
to talk about it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Creating platforms in which to talk about it. And sometimes social media hasn't always been the platform for me to talk about it. Although I do talk about it in groups, and I'll, if I go on a podcast, I'll say anything because, here we are. It's a one and done kind of in and out thing. But the divine feminine and divine masculine, if you think about that energy, it's very much yin and yang. It's the cycle of who we're cyclical beings, light and dark, seasonal, hot and cold, highs and lows, like all of that. It's all part of the cyclical nature of the human experience, or the mammalian experience, I guess. But I think it's an important aspect of this. And I think it's not like, I still laugh at how people talk about sleep. Like sleep is one of the most crucial aspects of health. It's like a marker, right? It's like our menstrual cycle is a fifth vital sign. Our sleep cycle is a really powerful marker to health. If you can't sleep, then you're not actually really living. And so that kind of yin yang nature to the cyclical nature of the human experience, it's also a big part of this too. And I think a lot of people aren't sleeping, which is a big part of why we are where we are at this point. But we're going through a massive up level in consciousness change planet, and I don't deal in the, beings, and I'm not a medium, right? So I work with what a woman's body is giving me. I don't work with beings and things like that. I mean, I have guides, but that's not what it is. It's really about, it's more of a clairvoyance, I suppose, or a clair than it is but I do channel things. So the point of this conversation, I'm sort of going off on a tangent here, but the point of what I'm saying here is that there's a massive up level. I mean, planets are doing things that they haven't done in 300 years. I mean, that's got to mean something in the world right now, and for how we're feeling.
I agree. And because I pay attention to all of it. Like I pay attention to the crazy freaks over here because I like to know what they're saying. I pay attention. I just had a family constellation session on Sunday. I've never had one of those before. It was really powerful. And that's a woman from Romania. She said the same thing. A good girlfriend of mine whose brother and sister are not into this stuff at all said they gave her a whole discussion about why this up leveling is happening. I'm seeing it all over. It's undeniable to me, and I feel it, and it feels turbulent and interesting. And so it's interesting if you're going through menopause at this time too. But we're all these things, and you're not going to win if you try to talk to someone who's just got their mind made up that they don't, that this is, if you're going to write an essay in a big newspaper, which I still read, oh, I was 47 when I went up to the cash register and everyone ignored me. And now I'm invisible and this is what I'm dealing with. And, to me, I've never resonated with those kinds of pieces because I'm like, I don't feel invisible. Like if you let yourself believe that and you start to feel invisible, it's like you're creating your own invisibility. Like you're creating that reality. So yeah. But you said before we started recording something interesting. You said no woman is the same. Like
no, not at all.
So these one size fits all remedies for perimenopause and menopause, but spiritually we're not the same. So when people come to you and energy wise, we're not the same. Is that what you meant?
Certainly. I mean, we all come. The interesting thing is, so like the upper three chakras are very much about our consciousness, but not as an individual. It's our personal consciousness that is a small kernel of something much bigger, right? So we're all aspects of source, and we're all reflecting back something to source. So it has more, I mean, this is again something that I just sort of channeled through me, but it feels like I am an aspect of something bigger and I am reflecting something back so that source has more identity, understands more of what it is and the magnitude that it is and what it's created. And so I feel like when we work in the upper three chakras, we're working with that. And the lower three chakras are very much about our personal physical experience of in our creativity, our safety, our security, and our personal power. The ability to feel powerful in our gut enough to have a thought and then transmute that thought into sound, which then comes out of our mouth. So do you know what I mean? Like there's so much transformation within us, but we have to understand and heal the lower three in order to truly be in the upper three and have it correspond and feel connected to something else. And then of course they meet in the middle with the heart, with the explosion that actually radiates very far out from our body. Our heart gives our brain way more than our brain gives our heart. So tending to the heart and understanding that this energy really does do that.
Okay.
So the reason why no two women are the same in my world is because even though we all have the same parts, we've all had different experiences. We've all perceived those experiences differently. And the way in which our body processes certain things, like when a woman comes to me, I see her, quote unquote, like in Chinese medicine, they call it the evils, right? So there you don't get a cold because you catch a virus. You get a cold because, for example, one reason is like you don't cover your neck. And so the evils, the wind comes in and it creates an energetic experience where your body can't fight off what's happening fast enough. And maybe you had a fight with someone, or, maybe you've got some dampness. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that the Chinese and traditional Chinese medicine, maybe talk about illness. And so that's what happens to me, is like a woman will come to me and I'll see the place in her that is her, I call it the weak spot, right? So for me, my weak spot is my right hip, and our hips are reservoirs. We hold a lot of emotion in our hips and in our shoulders. Hence the reason why a lot of women have shoulder issues and a lot of women need hip replacement. Like they are literally and physically a reservoir, and they are emotionally and spiritually a reservoir for holding things. So my hip is a reservoir, and I am delicate with it, and I strengthen it, and I talk to it, and I move the energy in it. And it all sounds kind of crazy, but I know that's mine. And when I look at someone, if I go into their energy, I can read what it is, where the weakness is. Then we work on together, her coming up with how to actually figure out how it began, if that's important, why it's still here, if that's important, and what to do about it, right? And so we work in the physical, but we work in the physical through the energy of it. So it's this true combination of like truly bringing the science and the spirit. And when I say science, it's an art of science. It's not like, well, your spleen is responsible for, producing your red blood cells.
It's not an aura reading.
Yeah, it's literally, I don't see auras. It's actually not an aura reading. I don't do that.
Okay.
It's really specific, and it's a beautiful thing. And it has the power to really shift and shape a woman's experience, especially between 40 and 55, but really any age, but that's like a sweet spot for my work. So.
Okay. Can you hold on 1 second? Because I'm just going to check. I'm supposed to be having this call, but I'm dubious about it because, it's supposed to be this call. It's supposed to be this call about this some weird TV station in, can you hold on 1 sec?
Yeah. Whatever.
It's this weird TV station in the US, and I already had a call with them once that was supposed to happen, and they just say they're going to call me, and they don't give me like a link. So I rescheduled it, and I said, you can't just call me. I'm in the UAE. You can't just dial the phone. So, and then they said, oh, just rebook. So basically I'm very skeptical that this call is happening because there's so what I'm going to do is keep talking to you. But if I say, ooh,
yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to wing it. Okay. So back in, when you said the third eye, the chakra, this chakra, I mean, that just resonates because is that why energy is bothering me? Is that why certain people are bothering me? Certain places are bothering me. Like I'm being much more aware that like, I don't want to be here right now. I'm having sensations, and probably it was always around, but I'm now tuning into it. Is that what's going on?
So without going in and reading your energy and really tapping in from a general perspective, yes. I mean, I remember at 42, between 42 and 45, I mean, I had a great life. We owned our home. My kids were good. Like everything was good. And I was emptying the dishwasher one day and I looked around and I was like, is this really all there is? Like I've accomplished everything there is. And now I'm just waiting to die. Like obviously
Oh,
that's not true, but I had that moment, right? And so it was in that moment that I realized, completely realized there's more. And there's more to uncover and there's more to unfold. And what I think is meant to be happening and the process that it's just, I was on autopilot for a long time. And I think that that's important. And it's okay to honor that we get on autopilot and we do this in our 20s and we do this in our 30s. And then we get to our 40s and we do this. And then all of a sudden we look around and we're like, why does this feel funny? Why is this person annoying the crap out of me right now? And
yeah.
why do I actually just want to run off to the forest or run off to the beach and just be with me or just be with my favorite girlfriends or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
we make it into something when in reality, it's just a shift in our energy, in our biology, in our life. It's our soul guiding us to a path that maybe is more over here, even though we were over here. I just think if we think about it too hard, then words kind of reduce it to something that's kind of like, oh, well, you're just a 49-year-old woman and you're going through the thing. And it's kind of like much bigger than that, and yet
Yeah.
not that big at the same time. Like I really pay attention when I'm in groups of people and I'm like, a little voice in my head is like, if you said something on your heart right now, it would be like Moses parting this, God parting the sea for Moses or whatever the story is. It'd be like the sound would stop and everybody would stop laughing and they would just, it's like, I have those moments and I'm like, okay, I have to listen to those moments. Like there is no veil anymore. Like the veil has been lifted and it just is what it is, So yeah, I think when we have these sensations, we have to listen to them. Otherwise, then you really are creating dissonance, or you're creating something within, I don't know that that's the right word, but you're creating something in you that is, you're feeling the friction of what I call feeling the friction inside. And that friction is a good thing when we first feel it because it gives us something to respond to. But if we continue living in the friction, what does that do? I mean, when we grind our teeth, we actually are grinding them down. We're grinding down. So you can grind to some extent, but then there's a point at which the grinding is detrimental.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think the world gives us these 10 or 12 years to kind of grind and melt and unravel and rocket, like sending different rockets out there. Like I've said some stuff and I'm like, okay, we're going to see where this lands. And it's just got to be okay. It just has to be okay.
And I think when you start moving, whatever it is, whatever this direction is, when you start moving just in the direction and then sort of stop fighting, that's what it feels like. In a lot of ways, it feels like I'm not fighting like I used to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because you're sort of, it sounds lame to say going with the flow, but you're going where the energy feels good.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying attention to the energy that you have. You're not, I mean, when I was younger, I would always say to people, oh, do you ever have this? Or do you have that? And they would always say, no, I don't know. Like, don't know what and I would just be like, oh, it must be nothing. And so I would never do that now. Right. Like, cause I sort of feel sorry for myself when I was younger. Cause I was like asking other people if the way I felt was correct. And there is no, correct. I just think it's absolutely fascinating. I think it's like so magical that I can't even really talk about it. Even on Hot Flash Inc., I don't talk about this stuff very often because I don't want people. I don't really know why I care. I guess because I'm a journalist. I always have struggled because I chose journalism, which is a very like hard nosed, and I was definitely not the type that was suited to it. Like I'm too soft probably for it. But I think because I'm a journalist, that gets has to be like hard angles but I believe it. I believe it. And you talk to women who've gone through the other side and they talk about this, then they really talk about it and let them have it.
Yeah.
So how's your own journey going?
My own journey is going quite well. And I feel quite fortunate because I feel like the really toughest health challenges, I have like little mini mushroom cloud explosions in health in my life. So like I had one at 30 when I thought I was dying, and I just had a thyroid condition that was not diagnosed for 2 years. And then it got to the point where it was then a full-on autoimmune disease. But 20 something years ago, there were no doctors doing the circuit. There was no internet. There were no books. No one was writing a book, no medical doctors. I mean, maybe Dr. Mercola had a book, but like nobody paid attention to any doctor that wrote a book. If you were on a show or wrote a book, you were some quack, right? Like that was just kind of not really a quack, but you know what I mean? Like it was just not done. It was not, nobody was making a living doing that. And the internet, like I said, the internet hadn't existed. So at the time I didn't know, and I was 30 years old and I was just doing my thing. And then I remember my doctor saying, oh, you just have an autoimmune disease. You just take a pill and you'll be fine. And I was part of the 1% of 1%. Like the pill regulated my lab results, but I actually felt worse on thyroid.
The birth control pill or thyroid medication?
Thyroid medication.
Okay.
So she started me on levothyroxine, which we know for most women does not work, and a really high dose, because I'm sure my numbers were off the freaking charts, because I was one of those weird women who I had a normal period. My period wasn't affected. So all the normal signs and symptoms for thyroid disease, I didn't fall into that category, but I had all of the signs and symptoms of Hashimoto's and autoimmune. So I haven't really suffered from any autoimmune symptoms since I had some symptoms after my second son. So it's been about 15 years, but I've pretty much, my thyroid will go in and out of quote unquote, positive lab results. The only thing that ever changes is I get a little bit of inflammation, or I gain a little bit of weight. I don't put a lot of stock in the labs. I put more stock in how I feel. I'm on the lowest dose. I was off of thyroid medication for like 5 years. And then at 46, I needed it again. I was like, okay, I can start to feel some things happening. And if I just get on the lowest dose, but I had been on over 100 and, I just didn't need that. But I use my acupuncturist and herbalist as my doctor, basically. I just believe and it works better for me. Like they're literally looking at my tongue, feeling my pulses and listening to what I feel in my body. And then we do acupuncture once a week, and every once in a while I eat herbs, and here I am. So
well, Hashimoto's is exploding now. Do you have an idea of energetically what's going on there?
It's exploding right now because Hashimoto's is in terms of the way that I have channeled, it is channeled through me. It is two things, right? It is a disease or the symptoms manifest itself through the throat chakra, right? And that's where the thyroid is. The thyroid is a major regulator in a lot of systems in the body. So that communication comes from all over. So for example, if you're somebody who, from a scientific perspective, if you're someone, it's a metabolic syndrome. It's very tied to metabolic syndrome. My thyroid is always the best when my weight is at its optimal, which doesn't mean I'm thin. Like I want to be really clear about this. By no means are we talking about an outline of a body or a number on the scale. But when I am definitely eating my best for my constitution, which is like, again, a whole other thing, but we should all be eating for our constitution. And when I'm very clear and I'm on a direction and I feel seen and heard and understood, that comes from within me, though, that doesn't come from outside of me. So when that is working, my thyroid is in great shape. And when I feel like I want to curl up in my little energetic cave, or when I feel like I'm not speaking my truth, or when I feel like I'm burning the candle at both ends, I watch my numbers, and it's of course it's energetic, and of course it's physiological. It's those two things put together. And it's exploding right now because the stress level of the world, we are watching I don't even want to call it news. Like, I don't even know what it's called now, but we're watching people report things that are, to some extent, I don't know how true they are. And to another extent, we don't have a grasp on what's really happening and how we're going to move forward. That's my personal opinion about what's happening in the news. And so that's going to cause a lot of stress in a woman's body. And when a woman doesn't feel safe, she is going to have a dysregulated thyroid. 100%.
That is so interesting. Well, having been in the media, yeah, I feel very strongly that there is one level of what people think is going on, and then there's a actual level that you have to not watch regular news to find out. You have to seek out other alternatives. And I'm a recovering journalist. That's what I call myself. So I know this, right? And that is very stressful, because you're dealing, an additional stress is you're moving through the world, and there's people who know what's going on, and then there's people who don't, and they're very sure about it. And so you're constantly like, this is very stressful. That's a very stressful feeling, to be like, you feel like you're in a movie or something. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theory stuff. I'm talking about actual truths and data and information that's not being reported. And how can you not feel crazy when you turn on the news and something that it's not there, that is true? That's a very interesting situation. So that is interesting. How like, with that on top of everything, like the personal stress, like how do you navigate that energetically?
You want the real answer?
Yes.
Okay. Every morning I read my own energy. I work on any, I work with some intense women. I work with women who have gone through great trials and tribulations, and women who have been through the fire. And I have a very caring, emotional soul. So I am very good at taking a little bit of that on, to hold space for that woman. So every day I have to clear my energy. I try to do it after a session, but I come home and talk about things, or I don't talk specifically about the people, but I come home and I talk to my husband about things and how I felt and how lucky we are and blah, blah, blah. But I truly read my own energy. I work on my own energy centers. I see an acupuncturist. I have body work every week. Like, it's a full-time job keeping up with this vessel of mine. And I honor that. I'm here for it. I honor it. I'm also a mom, so I'm like doing the mom thing. Like, I try to make every game, both between my two boys, it's like 5 sports, like they're little athletes, and it's a lot. So I eat as well as I possibly can. Like, I cook the majority of our food. Yes, we have pizza every once in a while, or yes, we'll have like gluten-free fast food if we can find it. But we eat a lot of simple home meals. That's huge, because the energy by which you do anything is the energy of what comes back to you. So, I just industrial farmed animals, like I can feel that when I eat it afterwards. Sounds corny, but it's just true. Like, the food that we eat literally becomes us. It becomes our organs, our blood, our bones, our eyes, our brain, and that becomes our consciousness, and then that becomes our energy. So it's not all about food, and yet food is like the most incredible foundation. And then I just try to find my people and surround myself with women who get it, women who help me raise my consciousness, and who don't bring me down. And that in and of itself is a full-time job. It's a full-time job. But clearing my energy every morning is huge, and working with my energy centers is really huge.
Well, it's interesting. Yesterday I interviewed a spiritual yoga guru, the head of the director of the Yoga Institute in Mumbai, like the big, this woman she's visiting here. And she's saying the same thing. And I almost cried. She said, you have to live yoga. You don't do yoga. And one of my bad habits is like, I'll do all this and then I'll relax. And I almost I felt it in me when she said, you have to live it. And as she described her day, it's really similar, like she's breathing in bed and stretching and consciously going to the bathroom and consciously preparing and standing up and going out to look out the window. And it's not this grab, and I watched her eat and it was just very thoughtful. So it's not like there's different ways to do it, right? But it's like essentially just being there and living it. And yeah, it's interesting to hear, because I'm sure someone might hear you say, oh, I have body work and acupuncture. And I've noticed that the first time I suggest anything on social media, like people tell me why that can't happen. And it's the victim mentality, right? Like we even made a video about getting morning sunlight and people were saying, well, I can't go outside because of my kids and I don't have sun here. And I'm like, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like everything is always, I've made a video, I haven't posted it yet, but it's like, everything is easier for everyone else and it's harder for me. That's such a common refrain. And we all do it. I've done it myself. Like for years, I'm not married and I don't have kids, but I'm not married. And I realized I was like thinking that I should have this magical man who would help me organize my money. And if I was married, I wouldn't have any of this confusion about money because this magical man would be here, not paying for things, just telling me what to do. Basically. And then that's just a realization I had just recently where I was like, well, that's just something I've made up. Like, I don't know if I'd even want that.
I mean, then you'd be having conversations about, well, if we're spending our money like this, then how come we can't, there's a flip side to all of that, right? Like I've thought once or twice, like, boy, when because my kids are, 3 and 4 years away from going to college, maybe if they decide to. I'm like, oh, in 3 years I'll be able to. And I'm like, nope, shut that down. Like life is now. Those 3 or 4 years, that's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. Right now. What do you want right now? I want to go on retreat. I want to meet this woman who talks about chakras like I channeled, and that's what I want. Like life is now. Life is not in the future. And something you said about being present. I mean, so many people injure their bodies from doing yoga. So I love that you said that about living, like tree of life. So I practice Iyengar. If I had to like categorize what I practice Iyengar. For me, it's the gentlest yoga. But I read snippets from that book. It's like the book I have like 4 books on my nightstand. It never changes. They never are finished. And yet I've read them many, many times. But that's one of the ones I pull from, and I'll just read a page or two, and it just brings me back to center. But I truly believe in my core channel, what I call my core channel. I don't know, probably has some very profound name and some sort of spiritual outlet, but my core channel, as long as I'm connected to that, like I'm like this, and I'm kind of dodging things. And like, as soon as I'm off of that, I'm like, being toppled over by the waves, and I'm eating sand. It's like, as long as I'm connected to my core channel, which is partly connection to my soul, which I feel like I'm only connected with my soul like in the past year. All these people that talk about their soul leading this and that, if you truly are like that, like, good for you. It took me a long time to connect to my soul. It was not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. And I'm empathic, emotional, always have been, even before the spiritual conundrum of delivery, was always very empathic, like new things, so I probably had always had it, but I attribute it from coming to that. But I do think being connected to some sort of inner core of your being, and for some people that's gardening, for some people that's walking, for some people that's jogging, for other people it's, I don't know, their cat or their dog. Yeah, cooking, whatever it is. Like it's connection to that core channel.
And I think women, you mentioned about the people you surround yourself with. I've had also a complete change in friends. Like, and I feel like people have come into my life, and then I feel frustration with like circles. Right before the pandemic, I started to feel a frustration. Can you hear my cat? She's got a few things to say. I felt frustration in the beginning of the pandemic with a group of friends, and that's only just sort of borne out. And then new people have come in. So this is really jarring for, I think people at this age. That's another thing you might fight, because what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? These people aren't doing it for me anymore. Like, that's almost like, that feels mercenary on a level.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. And for some women, it's even their marriage. Like, We
Yeah.
wanted the same thing for a long time, and now he's doing this, and I want that. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've been with my husband for, we've been together for 24 years. We've been married for 22. And we have each done incredible different, we've had reinvented ourselves. I don't know, 6, 8, I've reinvented myself. Good Lord, who knows how many times. I was a college professor, like in my early 30s, like, that didn't work. That really didn't work. I taught at a Catholic university.
Wow.
Hysterical.
Wow.
Oh my God, I've never felt like a bigger fish out of water. But I think just recognizing that everyone there are ebbs and flows, and we're always constantly allowing yourself to reinvent yourself when it's time, when it's needed to be. I think that's an important part. And then coming together in those partnerships or those relationships or those friendships, and having the courage to be fully and truly who you are and who you want to be, and allowing them to go with you, be on the train with you, instead of imagining they're going to kick you off. And when they kick you off, not making it mean anything about you, right? Like that's my biggest thing, is not making other people's beliefs about me actually mean anything about me. That's my biggest, one of my biggest downfalls. Sorry,
Commotion just jumped on the back of the chair and like speared me. I'm really sorry about my cat. I'll cut this out. It was beautiful what you were saying. Okay. How do you help women deal with the fear that comes with this sense of I'm losing this? I'm losing this. We know that, you've spoken about it beautifully, of like other things are coming and we're moving toward greater realizations, but it is fearful. It is, we've been taught to be scared. What if my marriage isn't, what if I have to leave my marriage? What if I lose my friend group? What if I have to leave my job? A lot of women are feeling this at this time and clinging to that feeling. How do you help walk them through that?
So 2 things. The first thing is, I don't think we value suffering enough. I truly don't believe we value suffering. In all traditional cultures, suffering was a very real, very valued part or stage or process in life, and that we didn't fear death. Most traditional cultures don't fear death. It's something to be, there is no end. There's only transformation, right? You're transforming, again, going back to our earlier conversation of energy can't be created or destroyed. It's just recycled. It's just moves into a different form. So I think, again, like in the cancer conversation, when there is suffering, what is the message? What is the lesson? What are the memories you're going to create from the person you become, from the experience that you're having? Which is different than I've suffered a long life, or I'm suffering. There's moments where I'm like, this pain has gone on too long. I've suffered enough. Like it's time to try some testosterone. But that's different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an instant in time that is really uncomfortable. If you do not lean into the discomfort, then you don't actually learn what you're meant to learn. And that's a universal law. Like you need to learn what you need to learn in this life. Otherwise, you will notice it repeats itself. And we don't want to repeat this. It's not very fun the first time. Why would you want to have it in relationship number 2 or relationship number 3? Right? So let's lean into it, and let's really allow ourselves to feel it. Let's be present with it. And let's realize that if this feels awful, there is the exact same energy, but in the most positive way. A love that is euphoric, a love that is like blossoms, like a bed of roses, like a field of roses, like that energy actually exists in the positive form. And so if you can believe that this is happening for you, not to you, then what are you going to learn from that? I'll give you an example. I had a histamine flare a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't know what it was. At first, I thought it was a Hashimoto. I was like, oh, I'm possibly having a Hashimoto. I do a fast a couple times a year. And this particular fast, I did with bone broth, which is a high histamine food. I had started some allergy drops because cedar fever in Texas is a thing. We live in Texas. And so all of these things together created a little histamine flare in my body, but I couldn't see it. Like I was like what is it? And I was shifting this and changing this and taking some herbs, and everything I was doing was high histamine. So if I were to do one or two of those things at a time, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But because I was doing them all at once, and I think the allergy drops were like the thing I've never done, and also the thing that tipped me over the edge, because I don't typically have histamine flares, and it wasn't a common histamine, like the symptoms weren't common, runny nose or itchy eyes or sneezing or cough or cold. It was a different histamine flare. And in that moment, I was like, I feel insane. I haven't slept in 5 days. I've got this going on. I've got this interview next week. And I looked at my husband and was like, just tell me I'm not losing it. Tell me I'm not going crazy. Tell me I truly am still medical intuitive. Tell me, like, I looked at him. He looked at me. He's repeated everything I said back to him. And he's like, this will pass. Lean into the suffering. And I was like, yep. And as soon as I leaned into the suffering, I went to an herbalist who's not my usual herbalist. I had her look at my tongue. She's like, I think you're having a histamine flare. Gave me a whole bunch of Western herbs, not Chinese herbs. I made a decoction. I started drinking it. Within 2 days, it was gone. And I was like, I need to talk about histamine flares. Like, I need to talk about that because I know about this and I didn't see it. You know what I mean? So I realize now the gap in something I need to talk about. But if I had only seen that as something that was horrible, and I need to get through it, and I need to take this medication, and I need to have a doctor fix this, and what's wrong, and this can't be happening, it's inconvenient. If I started down that path, it wasn't going to take me anywhere. But I was in the path of like, okay, if this is happening for me, what do I need to do? I looked at my tongue, it was a mess. I read tongues, but I don't read tongues. You know what I mean? I was like, I need someone outside of me to really look at me and help me figure this out right now, because it was just getting worse. And in that moment, I was led to the right person. And then within 2 days, it was gone. And then I had this whole epiphany of what I'm going to do in my group around histamine flares, because I think it's really common, especially with women with low estrogen. Histamine, because without estrogen, we aren't able to clear histamine fast enough in our body. And that's what happened. So as soon as I took 2 supplements and drank some tea, and I knew that, like the funny thing is, like, I knew that, you know what I mean?
You're panicking.
When
you were
you're in
panicking.
it, I was in the tornado. There was no getting out of the tornado. Tornado had me, and I was just
spiraling. I love the sound of your relationship with your husband. That's the kind of relationship I want, and that's why I've never gotten married, because I was like, that's what I want. I'll hold out for that. I can wait.
You know what? It's
be
cultivated.
patient.
It's cultivated.
Yeah.
It hasn't always been like that. We've had incredibly challenging years. And the early times of our relationship, I was like, what am I doing? What have I done? Like, this is insane. We didn't have kids for like 10 years. And we both were like, wow, what are we doing? But we couldn't stop. Like, we couldn't get off the train together. So
we were together.
It was meant to be. Like, this was a love that was meant to be. This is a partnership. We've been together many lifetimes in different forms. So we're just finishing out a cycle. Together. I'm not sure that I reincarnate again. So we're just finishing out the cycle together. And it's with every year, it gets better and better and better. But with the better and better and better, we'll have explosive moments. And I'm like, this might be the end. And then 3 days later, we're back. It's all good. Like, you know what I mean? So I also want to be honest about that. It's like, there are no perfect marriages. Is it work? Yeah, it's work. But we're cultivating it like we're growing rose bushes. We're not just plopping in an already existing gorgeous rose bush and thinking it's going to continue to bloom like it did from the greenhouse, right? So it's different.
You're having a real relationship. There's a lot of people who've been together for decades who aren't in a relationship with each other. They're in a relationship with some sort of avatar, I feel like, and then wondering why it doesn't feel fulfilling. And I want to write a book. I want to write a book called Everything I've Learned About Marriage by Staying Single. Because I became like a student of relationships and marriage. I was like overly fascinated while I sort of healed my own whatever to move towards. I've had relationships and I've had long-term relationships, but there was a long time I didn't. And I want to write a book about it. I have a lot of thoughts, but it is what I've learned. Like, it is what I've learned. So
Ooh, I should write the yang of that, or the yin of that, I guess. Everything I know about marriages, because I've been in one for 20 something years. Because people ask me, like, what has kept you together? And I'm like, universal energy has kept us together. Like, there are moments where both of us, I'm sure, wanted to jump ship and we couldn't, you know, and it's not because it was financial or there was a kernel within a strand within us that wouldn't let go, couldn't let go.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it is life affirming to talk to you because there's not that many people that you can talk to about like the soul and the truth of what we are and what's important. And that's just the world we live in, but that's really important work. And I know just my exchanges with you have made me feel really good. So I think I would like to see more of you in the perimenopause space, please.
Yes.
It needs you.
Okay. I will step forward.
You're
and do
needed
more.
there.
Yeah.
Even if it seems like you're not, even if it seems like it's very convenient to blame it all on this thing that shouldn't be happening right now. But I believe it should be happening because it is happening, right? That's the point.
Exactly.
That's the
Yeah.
bottom line. How do people engage with you? Like, do you do in where do they find you and how do they work with you?
So my website is my name, michelleaspinwall.com. I'm on most of them, TikTok, and I have a Facebook group called Body Whisperer Lounge. That's where I am my fully most honest, most open, most revealing part of me. And I'm on Instagram, Michelle P. Aspinwall, I think is my handle there. But yeah, and a Body Whisper session is probably it's like a one-off session. And that's where, you know, we do the journey work I call it a voyage. We take a voyage inside. It's guided meditation. So that's half of it. And the first half is we talk about what's going on. I'll read your energy, do a little channeling if it's pertinent, and, you know, give you a little kernel, give someone a little kernel of something to shift something. Usually it's like, did you hear that this is what, you know, mirroring back some things, but also channeling some things as well. That's probably the best way.
Do you do it over Zoom?
Yeah. I work with women all
amazing.
over the world. Very few women in Texas. I really don't have a Texas. I mean, we've just been here 2 years. So it's funny. We lived in New York for 20 something years and then jumped ship when the tornado hit. Yeah.
What do you call those people? What do you call yourselves? Are you not refugees? You're like, is there a term for the people who left the cities in the great?
You know, it's funny. We just bought a house and there's we live in it's kind of a small neighborhood and people live there for 15, 20 years. And everyone thought we came from California. So we were those California folks because California folks are kind of quote unquote ruining Texas. It's what everyone here thinks. And I don't think it's as many New Yorkers left. I think a lot of New Yorkers went to the outlying communities and then they kind of came back to the city or they stayed in those communities. Whereas I feel like, or they went to Miami. I think that's where most New Yorkers went to.
Or Nashville maybe, or like
Nashville. Yeah, there's a couple of big cities. But I don't think as many New Yorkers came to Texas as California because of the tech industry. But we're just we're low key. Like we kind of fit in. Well, my husband doesn't, but I do. I fit in. I grew up in Kentucky. So I feel like I'm a chameleon. I can live anywhere. But he's just like, what are we doing? This is crazy, but it's good. The kids are happy. So, you know.
Oh, that's great. Well, I learned when I moved here, you can't move to a new place and expect to have things the way that they were where you were before. That's that'll create problems right off the bat. That's not going to be a fun transition. You got to just what the place has for you.
Exactly. I mean, we moved for the kids really. And then I don't know, I have this dream of being a digital nomad once my kids are out of the house. Like, he'll probably stay here and I'll probably nomad and come back and forth, and he might meet me in the places that he wants to go, but he's not as much of a jet setter as I am. I mean, he follows me around in the greatest possible way, but as long as he has his backpack of books, like he's fine. He just needs like 15 books to keep him happy. And,
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate speaking to you.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah. My heart feels good. Thank you.